Emma, 19, and Sara, 21, thought Liverpool was just another city full of opportunities. They had no idea that behind friendly smiles and job offers, a ruthless network was waiting one that would trap them, betray them, and change their lives forever. Liverpool seemed like any other bustling city. Its streets were alive with people, lights reflected off the Mersey, and music and chatter filled the air in cafes and pubs. Tourists wandered along the waterfront, snapping photos of the iconic Liver building, while locals moved through their daily routines, unaware of the darkness quietly spreading beneath the surface. On the outside, everything appeared normal, peaceful even. But behind closed doors, lives were being quietly stolen. It started subtly. Young women would disappear for hours, sometimes days, and return looking different, distant, afraid to speak. Their friends noticed changes, once cheerful personalities now withdrawn, smiles replaced with tension. Families tried to ask questions, but the answers were vague, hesitant. At first, police treated each case separately. A missing person here, a late-night disappearance there. Nothing seemed connected, and nothing seemed urgent. Liverpool's law enforcement saw no pattern, no cause for alarm. The first signs of trouble were almost invisible, hidden in plain sight. A woman who never stayed out late suddenly avoided going out after dark. Another who relied on public transport refused to leave her apartment unaccompanied. Observers would have written these changes off as personal choices, stress, or the struggles of young adulthood. No one suspected that these behaviors were symptoms of a more sinister presence. The predators were careful, watching from the shadows, choosing their targets with patience and precision. The victims did not realize they were being groomed. Each encounter seemed normal at first. A friendly face offering help, someone claiming to provide support or guidance, or a stranger offering a job or opportunity that seemed legitimate. The city itself became a stage, providing a sense of normalcy while the true story unfolded behind closed doors. These predators understood the subtlety of fear, the way it could be imposed without violence. Liverpool's streets, bustling and familiar, became a trap. Even the most ordinary moments became dangerous. A bus ride home, a walk through a park, or a stop at a corner shop could lead to exploitation. The gang's presence was invisible, yet they were everywhere. They did not rely on force or loud intimidation. They relied on quiet manipulation, exploiting trust and social networks to isolate their victims. Each woman trapped in this invisible web felt as though the world outside had moved on, unaware of her suffering. As the city carried on with its everyday life, the gang's operations grew. Apartments, abandoned buildings, and rented rooms were quietly transformed into spaces of control and surveillance. Every disappearance, every brief absence, was calculated to avoid attention. The predators relied on the chaos of daily life, blending into the city's rhythm, unseen and unnoticed. By the time patterns began to emerge, months of activity had passed. Lives had been disrupted, fear had settled in, and the sense of safety that Liverpool's residents took for granted had begun to erode. The city's calm was deceptive. Beneath the surface, a network of control and exploitation was forming, patient and precise, waiting for the moment when someone would notice and fight back. This was Liverpool at its quietest and most dangerous, a city where the ordinary could conceal the extraordinary horrors of crime, and where the first threads of a much larger story were being woven without anyone realizing it. The danger was there, silent, pervasive, and almost impossible to detect. The gang's methods were subtle, built on trust and deception rather than overt violence. They understood that control could be far more effective when it began as kindness. Opportunities were their bait. Job offers, promises of accommodation, or even casual friendships were extended with careful calculation. Each approach seemed harmless, even generous. A young woman struggling to make ends meet might be offered a well-paid cleaning job, a chance to move into a better apartment, or a friend who seemed concerned about her welfare. These gestures appeared ordinary, unremarkable, yet they were the first step in a meticulous plan of exploitation. The victims rarely saw danger coming. The gang's members were skilled manipulators, able to read emotions and exploit vulnerabilities. They identified those who were isolated, financially insecure, or seeking affection. Once a connection was made, the next steps followed smoothly. Trust was established, and with it, dependence. A hand extended in help could quickly become a chain that bound the victim. Those who had once been cautious found themselves opening doors, sharing personal information, and following suggestions that would later limit their freedom. Isolation was gradual but deliberate. Friends, family, and familiar social structures were slowly pushed aside. The gang often encouraged victims to distance themselves from anyone who might question their choices. Small suggestions: move closer to work, avoid late-night outings, or cut ties with certain people seemed innocent at first. Over time, these small choices accumulated, creating an environment where the victim felt alone and increasingly reliant on the very people who were manipulating her. The world outside shrank to a single circle of control, and a sense of normal life disappeared.
Once this dependence was established, manipulation became more direct. Victims were subtly reminded that they owed loyalty to those who had helped them. Threats were not always spoken. They were implied through missed appointments, sudden withdrawal of support, or the ever-present fear of being alone and without resources. Even the kindest gestures of the past could be twisted into instruments of coercion. Every promise, every favor became part of the web. Victims began to feel trapped. Though their minds struggled to understand why they could not leave, the gang's ability to operate was strengthened by the appearance of normalcy. The city around them went about its business, offering a veneer of everyday life that concealed the hidden operations. Cafes, buses, shops, and apartments became part of the trap. Each victim felt the safety of familiar routines, but the routines themselves were manipulated. The danger was not in sudden violence, but in the quiet erosion of freedom, carried out in the guise of opportunity and friendship. By the time the first signs of fear appeared, the trap was almost complete. Leaving required more than courage. It required overcoming a carefully constructed network of control. The victims had been convinced that the world outside was unpredictable, dangerous, or indifferent to their struggles. The gang had instilled a sense of dependency that was difficult to break. Even when the victims recognized the danger, what had begun as opportunity had transformed into captivity, and what had seemed like kindness had become betrayal. The city, unaware, continued its rhythm. Streets, offices, and homes offered no clues to the quiet manipulation happening behind closed doors. The gang's power lay not in visible threats, but in the invisible chains of trust, dependence, and fear. By the time authorities would begin to piece together the crimes, the victims were already uncensored, and the trap had become a reality that was nearly impossible to escape. What had seemed like an ordinary gesture, a job, a friendly smile, a helping hand, was in fact the first step in a carefully orchestrated path toward betrayal. The apartments the gang used were ordinary on the outside, blending seamlessly into Liverpool's neighborhoods. From the street, nothing seemed unusual: painted doors, curtains in the windows, the faint hum of everyday life inside. But behind those walls, reality was far different. Each unit became a carefully controlled environment, a prison disguised as a home. Locks were reinforced, phones and identification were taken, and the comings and goings of the occupants were monitored. The women inside quickly realized that the freedom they had once taken for granted no longer existed. Movement was restricted in subtle ways at first. Victims were told it was for their own safety. They were instructed to stay inside during certain hours, to avoid interactions with neighbors, or to follow specific routines. These rules seemed reasonable at first, common sense precautions, a way to stay safe in a city that could be unpredictable. But the rules were designed to limit freedom and build dependence. Each restriction narrowed the world, cutting the victims off from friends, family, and anyone who might notice their absence. Surveillance became routine. Every detail of daily life was tracked and reported to the gang's leaders. Even small infractions could be noticed and punished. Reinforcing control, cameras and hidden observers were strategically placed. But often the fear of punishment alone was enough to keep victims in line. They learned quickly that resistance was dangerous, and compliance became the only way to survive. The apartments themselves became a psychological tool, a space where the gang could manipulate both body and mind. Victims were moved frequently. One apartment might be used for weeks, then suddenly abandoned. Another location would appear, carefully chosen to avoid suspicion from neighbors or authorities. These shifts prevented anyone from forming a clear picture of the victim's routines or locations. Friends and family could search, call, or visit, only to find the trail had vanished. Even law enforcement struggled to track the patterns, seeing only isolated incidents rather than a coordinated network of control. Isolation went beyond physical confinement. The gang ensured that women had minimal access to communication. Phones were confiscated or monitored, messages were controlled, and outside contacts were discouraged. Victims could not reach the outside world for help without risking detection. The psychological impact was devastating. Loneliness, fear, and uncertainty became constant companions. The outside world seemed distant, almost unreal, while the small, controlled environment of the apartment became the only reality they knew. The city moved around them without noticing. Commuters passed by on streets. Children played in parks, and shopkeepers greeted regular customers, all while the hidden horrors continued behind ordinary doors. This invisibility was part of the gang's strategy. Fear could be enforced quietly, without drawing attention. The women lived in constant tension, aware that danger existed just beyond sight, yet unable to escape the controlled spaces that had become their homes. Even simple actions became exercises in careful calculation. A walk to the corner store, a trip to a nearby cafe, or a conversation with a delivery person required permission or careful timing. Every decision was filtered through the gang's control, and every moment of independence risked punishment. Over time, the apartments became not just living spaces, but symbols of captivity. Walls that had once offered comfort now represented confinement. Doors that had once invited entry now locked victims into a life of fear. The invisible prison had become complete, and for those inside, the world beyond seemed almost impossible to reach.
This carefully controlled environment allowed the gang to maintain dominance. Physical restrictions and psychological manipulation worked hand in hand to create obedience. The victims learned quickly that survival meant compliance, and compliance meant the slow erosion of autonomy. Liverpool's streets remained vibrant and familiar, but for the women trapped inside, the city had become a distant, unreachable world. The invisible prison had no bars, no chains, yet its hold was total, and the sense of danger was always close, always looming. The operation was not random. It was meticulous, organized, and calculated down to the smallest detail. Each member of the gang had a clear role, creating a structure that functioned like a well-oiled machine. Some were tasked with recruitment, identifying potential victims and establishing initial trust. Others focused on logistics, arranging transportation between locations, securing safe houses, or moving victims quickly to avoid detection. Surveillance and enforcement were handled by a separate group, ensuring that anyone who disobeyed the rules or tried to escape faced immediate consequences. The network thrived because it was systematic, not chaotic. Money was at the center of the operation. Profits flowed through legitimate-seeming businesses and hidden accounts alike, disguising the source of the income and making it difficult for authorities to trace. Every transaction was recorded, every movement accounted for, and every member understood the financial stakes. The criminals believed that the careful documentation of their profits and schedules reinforced their control rather than exposing them. Their confidence grew with each passing month, as if their organization made them untouchable. The gang's planning extended beyond Liverpool. Communication with contacts abroad allowed for the sharing of victims, money laundering, and evasion of law enforcement. They maintained a network that stretched across borders, making it difficult for any single agency to intervene effectively. Coordination was achieved through encrypted messages, coded notebooks, and secret meetings. The scale was vast, yet it operated quietly, blending seamlessly into the normal life of the city. No flashy displays of crime, no public intimidation, only the slow, relentless spread of influence and control. The victims were central to the system. Each woman was catalogued, tracked, and monitored. Their movements, routines, and vulnerabilities were studied, with each piece of information used to reinforce dependence. The gang understood psychology and used it as carefully as they used locks or keys. Fear was managed with precision. Subtle threats, isolation, and manipulation ensured compliance without the need for overt violence. Victims learned quickly that any deviation from the rules invited consequences, and even the smallest infraction could provoke punishment. Yet the organization had a cruel duality. While meticulous in control, it relied on secrecy and deception to avoid exposure. Members communicated in code, identities were concealed, and operations were fragmented to prevent detection. Even within the gang, information was compartmentalized, so no single person held the full picture. This internal strategy allowed the network to function efficiently, while also providing a buffer against law enforcement interference. Each participant was both empowered and constrained by the system, knowing their role but never the full extent of the operation. Despite their discipline, cracks existed. The reliance on strict adherence and secrecy created vulnerabilities. One careless mistake, one overlooked detail, could unravel months of planning. Yet even with these risks, the gang continued to expand, confident in their organization and the invisibility it provided. The city's normal rhythms acted as camouflage, masking the scope of the network from neighbors, authorities, and the public. Liverpool's familiar streets, crowded buses, and bustling shops became the perfect backdrop for crimes carried out with methodical efficiency. This system of exploitation demonstrated a chilling intelligence. It was not violence for its own sake, nor chaos for attention. It was a calculated, profit-driven, and psychologically manipulative operation designed to control, isolate, and exploit. Each aspect of the network reinforced the others, creating a structure that seemed unbreakable. The gang's organization was its greatest strength, and, as would later be revealed, its greatest vulnerability. Every carefully constructed rule, every scheduled movement, and every documented transaction eventually became a thread that investigators could follow, slowly unraveling the network from the inside. Liverpool, a city of history, music, and life, had become the stage for a dark, calculated operation, invisible to the public but meticulously maintained behind closed doors. The gang's systematic approach showed how ordinary locations and routines could hide extraordinary crimes, and how an organized system could trap its victims with terrifying precision. The operation had gone unnoticed for months, perhaps even years, until one small mistake changed everything. One victim, unlike the others, found an opening, a moment when vigilance lapsed, when opportunity appeared. It was a brief window, but she seized it with courage born of desperation. She fled from an apartment that had become a cage, moving through streets she once thought familiar but now felt alien. Fear propelled her forward, and instinct guided her steps. She did not stop until she was far enough to think she might be safe, yet the danger she had escaped was never far behind. Unlike the others, she did not disappear silently. She left traces, accidental clues at first, a detail mentioned to a friend, a location she had memorized, a description of a vehicle or an address. At first, these fragments seemed insignificant, scattered pieces of a puzzle too complex to understand. But each detail built upon the last, slowly forming a pattern that investigators could not ignore. What had seemed like isolated incidents began to take shape as part of a larger, terrifying network.
Her bravery marked a turning point. Police, initially overwhelmed by the disconnected cases, began to see links between disappearances, patterns of recruitment, and recurring locations. The escape had inadvertently provided the first real window into the operation, a map for law enforcement that had previously been invisible. Investigators started to cross-reference names, addresses, and timings. Slowly, the dots connected, revealing an intricate system that had operated quietly in plain sight. The gang, confident in its secrecy, did not anticipate that one escape could unravel months of planning. Their procedures, once foolproof, became vulnerable. The records they kept, the schedules, the safe house locations, and the coded notebooks suddenly carried a new weight. With a single person willing to speak and leave traces, the network was no longer invisible. Even the carefully compartmentalized operations could be compromised. The gang's confidence, built on months of meticulous control, began to crack under the pressure of discovery. For the victim, escaping was only the beginning. She faced fear beyond the gang itself, the uncertainty of how the city, the authorities, and even strangers would respond. But her determination was unshakable. Every detail she remembered became a tool to expose the gang, each observation a piece of evidence. Her survival required not only courage but precision, as revealing too much too soon could provoke retaliation. She learned quickly how critical timing and discretion were, and how her knowledge could change the course of the investigation. Authorities began to uncover patterns that had been invisible to them for months. Surveillance footage, phone records, and tip-offs all converged around her testimony. The escape provided context that had been missing, showing not just what happened, but how the operation functioned. Investigators could begin to anticipate the gang's moves, tracing routes, understanding their methods, and identifying weaknesses that had gone unnoticed. The escape shifted the balance of power. For the first time, the gang was being chased, rather than being the chasers. What had seemed untouchable was suddenly vulnerable. The momentum shifted from fear to pursuit, from silence to revelation. Liverpool's authorities had the first real opportunity to dismantle a network that had thrived in darkness. One person's courage had ignited a chain of events that would expose the hidden operation, transforming fear into action and secrecy into evidence. The escape revealed a crucial truth. Even the most controlled and meticulously planned criminal network can be undone by vigilance, courage, and the smallest of mistakes. The balance of power had changed, and the investigation now had a foothold to begin unraveling the web of exploitation that had silently spread across the city. The police raids began quietly, with officers moving carefully to avoid alerting anyone inside. The first locations were ordinary apartments and rented spaces, places that would never have drawn attention under normal circumstances. Yet as officers entered, the reality of the gang's operation became immediately clear. Phones, notebooks, and laptops were seized, many containing coded messages, schedules, and contact lists. What had seemed like isolated incidents now revealed themselves as parts of an organized network, meticulously documented and maintained with chilling precision. The notebooks were perhaps the most shocking. At first glance, they appeared to be random jottings, numbers, letters, and symbols scrawled across pages. But forensic teams quickly identified patterns, discovering that the codes tracked victims, dates, locations, and payments. Every movement of the victims was recorded, every job and interaction meticulously logged. The gang had unknowingly created a map of their crimes, turning what they considered organizational strength into the evidence that would convict them. Phones provided another layer of insight. Encrypted messages revealed the coordination between members, the transfers of victims between locations, and the management of money. Calls and texts confirmed schedules found in the notebooks and expanded on them, showing real-time decisions and the methods used to maintain control. Officers began to reconstruct the daily operations of the gang, understanding how victims were moved, monitored, and manipulated. Liverpool's cobbled streets whisper tales of history, of music, of maritime glory. But beneath this vibrant surface, a different kind of story was unfolding, one of shadows, secrets, and a criminal empire built on fear. For years, a sophisticated network operated with impunity, their influence seeping into the very foundations of the city. They were ghosts, their faces unknown, their methods precise, leaving a trail of broken lives in their wake. They believed they were untouchable, masters of a game played in the dark. But they forgot one crucial rule. Every shadow is cast by a light, and dawn was about to break. This is the story of how that empire crumbled. It begins not with a bang, but with a whisper, a single piece of data, a tiny digital breadcrumb left behind in the vast, interconnected world of modern finance. While the network's leaders moved with an arrogant sense of security, a dedicated team of investigators was piecing together a puzzle that stretched across continents. The chase was on. We see flashes of it now. A hurried booking for a one-way flight out of John Lennon Airport, a sudden large cash withdrawal from an ATM in a quiet European town, a frantic phone call traced to a ferry crossing the Irish Sea. Each action, designed to erase their tracks, was instead another pin on the investigators' map. They thought they were disappearing, but every digital move only made them more visible. The gang members believed their physical escape guaranteed their freedom. They fled across city lines, then international borders, confident that the chaos of travel would cover their retreat. But in the 21st century, the most damning evidence isn't always physical. While they were boarding planes and crossing borders, analysts were meticulously tracking something else: the flow of money. Bank records became their high-tech tracking dogs, sniffing out transactions that painted a vivid picture of the network structure. Encrypted ledgers, once thought impenetrable, were being painstakingly decoded, revealing the names, the dates, and the staggering sums of money involved in their illicit operations. The illusion of a clean getaway was just that, an illusion. The net wasn't just closing in on the streets of Liverpool. It was a global digital dragnet, and it was tightening with every passing hour. The transition from shadow to light was stark and unforgiving. One moment, they were hidden in nondescript apartments, coordinating their operations through coded messages and burner phones. The next, they were standing under the cold, bright lights of a courtroom. The same phones that had been their tools of control were now exhibits A, B, and C. The coded messages, once a symbol of their secret society, were displayed on large screens for the jury to see, their hidden meanings laid bare by expert testimony. Financial logs, meticulously kept to manage their criminal enterprise, were now the very roadmap leading to their conviction. The illusion of control, so carefully constructed, evaporated. In the sterile, formal environment of the court, their power was gone. They were no longer faceless puppet masters. They were just defendants, facing the undeniable weight of the evidence stacked against them. The intricate web they had woven to ensnare others had become their own trap. As the pillars of the criminal network fell, another story began to emerge from the rubble, one of resilience and recovery. For every headline about the arrests, there were countless untold stories of the survivors. These were the people whose lives had been derailed, who had lived in the shadow of the network's influence. Their journey toward healing was just beginning. In the aftermath, The city of Liverpool didn't just celebrate a victory, it mobilized. Community centers opened their doors, offering counseling and support. Local charities established new programs to help people rebuild their lives, providing everything from job training to safe housing. It was a powerful demonstration of a city's true strength, not just in its ability to fight darkness, but in its commitment to healing the wounds left behind. The focus shifted from dismantling a network of criminals to rebuilding a network of support, proving that community is the most powerful force of all. But what is the ultimate lesson learned from this dramatic fall? Looking out over the streets of Liverpool today, from the pier head to the quiet residential lanes, there's a new sense of vigilance. The city feels the same, yet different. It's a reminder that even the most sophisticated systems of manipulation are fragile. They are built on lies, fear, and secrecy foundations that can't withstand the persistent pressure of truth. This wasn't just a police operation. It was a testament to the power of ordinary people who refused to stay silent, to the investigators who followed the faintest of trails, and to a community that chose to stand together. The real victory isn't just the empty jail cells or the seized assets. It's the enduring message that echoes through the city. Truth, when pursued with relentless persistence, will always find its way to the light. The shadows may linger, but they will never again hold the same power. This saga serves as a crucial reminder for every city, every community. Criminal networks thrive in the dark, preying on silence and isolation. But they are dismantled by connection, by courage, and by the unwavering belief that justice is worth fighting for. The tools of the modern world, from digital forensics to international cooperation, have leveled the playing field. But the most powerful tool of all remains the human spirit, the determination to see a case through, to support a neighbor in need, and to build a society where such darkness cannot take root. Liverpool's story is a powerful chapter in that ongoing fight, a beacon of hope showing that no matter how entrenched an empire of crime may seem, it can be brought down, piece by piece, by the simple, unstoppable force of people working together for a better, safer future. Thank you for watching. If this story resonated with you, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more deep dives into the stories that shape our world. Stay safe and stay vigilant.
The meticulous nature of the records revealed a cold efficiency, a system designed to maximize control and profit while minimizing exposure. Financial evidence was equally damning. Bank accounts and business records uncovered payments that were disguised as legitimate transactions but were clearly tied to the exploitation of victims. Shell companies and offshore accounts masked the flow of money, yet the sheer volume of records left trails that could not be ignored. The investigators realized that the gang's attention to detail, the very thing that had made them so formidable, had also made them vulnerable. Each carefully documented transaction and schedule provided a point of entry into the network, a thread that could be pulled to unravel the operation. As the raids continued, investigators discovered the full scale of the network. Dozens of victims were found in apartments across Liverpool, often in hidden rooms or locations designed to avoid detection. Their testimonies, combined with the material evidence, painted a comprehensive picture of the gang's operations. The survivors' courage, paired with the gang's own records, allowed authorities to see the network not just as a series of crimes, but as an organized enterprise of exploitation. The more evidence the investigators uncovered, the clearer the gang's reach became. It was not limited to one neighborhood or even one city. Connections to other towns and countries emerged, showing a system of recruitment, transportation, and control that extended far beyond Liverpool. Each discovery exposed the sophistication of the operation, but also provided a pathway for law enforcement to dismantle it piece by piece. The hidden files had turned the tide. What had once been invisible, untraceable, and carefully concealed was now tangible and prosecutable. The gang's greatest strength, the meticulous documentation of their operations, had become their undoing. Investigators now held the keys to understanding the full network, exposing both its scale and its inner workings. Liverpool, a city that had seemed untouched by such horrors, now faced the shocking reality of what had been happening quietly in its streets. The evidence would not just lead to arrests, it would reveal the hidden truth, piece by piece, about how fear and control had thrived under the guise of ordinary life. The arrests began quietly but swiftly. coordinated with precision to catch the gang members off guard. Early in the morning, police units moved through Liverpool and surrounding towns, entering apartments, offices, and rental properties. Each location was planned based on the evidence gathered from the raids: coded notebooks, surveillance footage, phone records, and survivor testimonies. The gang, so confident in its secrecy, had no warning that the net was closing. What had seemed untouchable was suddenly vulnerable, and the carefully orchestrated operation began to crumble.